Walk with me through every fire in the land. Walk with me, a time of love is close at hand. Let's come together, united we stand, side by side, step by step. Walk with me, walk with me. When our brothers and sisters cannot breathe, let it be known we won't back down, we won't leave. When we're facing any kind of struggle, there's a hero there trying to wash away all of your troubles. Walk with me through the drama, these days will pass. Walk with me, a time of love is close at hand. Let's come together, united we stand, side by side, step by step. Walk with me, walk with me. So take a hand and let's dive into the water.
Joss Stone, Walk With Me. Before that, a clip, one of several from Stories of J.G. Ballard, Creative Commons on the Internet Archive. And recent interviews, Joss Stone, she's still quite happy for music to be copied, distributed in various ways. And I'll talk around that sort of thing, what we're doing online or with FM, what's going on with all those things, especially in the lockdown, because everything seems to be moving more online. But I do recycle things. Some content comes out of YouTube and then versions of the shows go back to YouTube. But the last one, there was a problem. Warner Music Group on this single, Walk With Me, and it's blocked in Syria, North Korea, Cuba, somewhere else as well. So the world tour next time around, I don't know how far that's going to go. Anyway, going back to this show now, Gilgamesh Part 3, Widsith and Dior. I'm thinking about theatre, the street, and also shops. What can be done in shops? There was an idea for a proposal we might have done as a group around the Wild Show and We Don't Know show. There'll be our play towards the end of this show. But we did have a proposal at one point. There was an idea of taking over empty shops and putting art into them, and we thought it could be a radio studio. But it turns out it's for visual art. So we're just thinking of that as something to come back to. The Widsith and Dior Theatre could be a visual for it though, if you could put up a teepee somewhere or have a photograph of the teepee, something like that, or some masks around. Anyway, more on that later, and also the Street Arts Festival. There'll be some more comment about that, because I think the YouTube channel from MIDI is actually going to happen sometime quite soon. So I'll be going back to the Street Arts Festival, where that might have been launched sometime last year.
They will never age. Immortal.
And so I washed in the stream nearby as she bathed me, and I pulled out the mats from my hair until I looked something like myself again. And I put on the clothes that she gave me, and I went again before the pasture, seeking audience.
Now you are fitting. Yes, I am a mortal man. I am not burdened by his thoughts of divinity.
But then, may I ask, Utnapishtim, how is it that you alone of all mankind were granted immortality?
I was. By fate and destiny. It is what the 7 judges had for me.
And so he agreed to tell me the tale.
I shall tell you the story of the flood.
Well now, Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, he said, I will tell you how this Utnapishtim gained his immortality. Long ago. You know the city Shuruppak that lies on the banks of the river Euphrates? Well, that city grew old, and the gods that were in it grew old. There was Anu, lord of the sky. There was Shamash, the sun god. There was Ninurta, the god of the wells and canals. There was Enlil, the warrior god. There was Ishtar, our lady of love and war. And with them also there was Ea. Ea alone it is who knows all things. Now in those days, the world teemed with people. The people multiplied and the world roared and bellowed like a wild bull. And so the gods were aroused by the great clamour. And so it was that one day Enlil, enraged, came to the gods in council, and he said, "Sleep is no longer possible by reason of the babble. We must do something." And so he persuaded the gods. And so it was that they agreed then and there to exterminate mankind, all save Ea. But Ea, he said nothing. He came down to me in a dream, and he came outside my house of reeds, and he said one night, "Reed house, reed house. Oh, wall, hearken, and wall, reflect. Oh, man of Shuruppak, tear down your house, I say, and look for life. Abandon possessions, build a house, build a boat. Tear down your house and build a boat. Put into it your family, the beasts of the field, both wild and tame. Put into it the seed of all living things. Tear down your house, I say, and build a boat. Abandon possessions and look for love." And when at last, through sleep and dreaming and half waking, I had understood what he had said, I replied, "Behold, my lord, I will honour and obey. I will perform what you command." And so the boat was built with much labour. Huge it was, so much wood we used. Oh, and I put into it some few possessions that I thought we could take, and as much food and drink as I thought it would hold. I put into it my wife, my family, the craftsmen, the beasts of the field, both wild and tame. I put into it the seed of all living creatures, all that I could find. And then, so the boat was built with so much labour and prepared. Then was the launching full of difficulty. There was shifting of ballast above and below. It was vast, 3 cubits higher than it was wide even. But just in time, it was finished. Because when the rains came, they started to fill the land like a bowl. Down and down it came, and the water rose and rose and rose. And it was just at that moment that I handed the tiller to the steersman. Because with the first light of dawn, there came a black cloud over the horizon. It thundered from within, where Adad, lord of the storm, was riding. In front over hill and plain, there Charlotte and Hamish, heralds of the storm, led on. Then the gods of the abyss rose up. Nurgle pulled out the dams of the nether waters. The nurse of the warlord threw down the dikes. And the 7 judges of hell, the Anunnaki, raised their torches, lighting the land with their livid flame. The steeple of despair went up to heaven when the god of the storm turned daylight to darkness, when he smashed the land like a cup. One whole day the tempest raged, gathering fury as it went. It poured over the people like the tides of battle. A man could not see his brother, nor the people be seen from heaven. Even the gods were terrified at the flood. They fled to the highest heaven, to the firmament of Anu, and there they cowered like curs. And so it was at last, the storm abated. And I could hear nothing except the lapping of the water outside the boat. And it was then that I opened the hatch and the light streamed in. And then I got out onto the deck, and I looked. And there, all around me, there was nothing at all. Just the waters, absolutely flat, like a roof, for leagues and leagues and leagues. Save far in the distance, I thought I made out the top of a mountain, now an island. And so we started to sail toward it. And I let out the swallow, but she flew away and returned, for there was no resting place. After that, I let out the dove, and she flew away, but she returned, for there was no resting place. But finally, at last, I let out the raven, and she flew away, and she did not come back. And so I knew that it was not a mirage. And so, steadily, we sailed to the mountain isle. And at last, we came there, and we beached the boat. Then I got out what wood I had brought, and I built a fire. And I burnt incense, and we poured out libations to the gods. And the gods gathered around it like flies. All that is, save Enlil, the warrior god. And he looked down, and he was wroth. And he said to the gods in council, how was this possible? Not one of these mortals was to have escaped the deluge. How was this? Who was responsible? But Ishtar, our lady of love and war, she said, oh, my people, I who grew their crops to feed them, it is my people that you have killed, Enlil, so-called wisest of the gods. And then, Ninurta, the god of the wells and canals, he turned to Enlil and he said, Enlil, wisest of the gods, how could you so senselessly bring down the flood? Listen to Ea. Ea alone it is who knows all things. And it was then that they all turned to Ea. And Ea, so often silent, he opened his mouth and he said, Enlil, lay upon the sinner his sin. Lay upon the transgressor his transgression. Punish him a little lest he break loose. Drive him not too hard or he perishes. Better that a lion had ravished mankind rather than the flood. Better that a wolf had ravished mankind rather than the flood. Better that a famine had ravished mankind rather than the flood. Better that a pestilence had ravaged mankind rather than the flood. And after he had spoken so, Enlil was silent, and he came down to the mountain isle, and he stood aboard the deck of our boat, and he bade me and my wife kneel either side of him, and he blessed us, and he raised us up, and he granted us immortality, and he set us to live here by the waters between the worlds for all time, immortal, and join the assembly of the gods. And that, King Gilgamesh, is how Utnapishtim gained his immortality.
Gilgamesh had stood bolt upright throughout that entire account, and at the end of it, he turned and said,
No gods will come in council for me.
"No, none," said Utnapishtim's wife. "But can you not revel in this? Is not your mortality precious? For your destiny is the destiny of men, written by the 7 judges, the Anunnaki. That is your fate. Revel in it, man."
Is there nothing I can do? No great test I can perform? No quest I can go upon?
There's no quest. Save one.
What? Tell me, I will do it.
Prove that you are already divine.
How do I do that?
Stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights in this garden that is but a vision to you.
I know I can do this. I can do this, exhausted as I am. No sleep beckons my every pore. I know that I can do this. I shall squat on my haunches to wait, because no man can fall asleep that way. And I shall put twigs between my eyelashes so that they prop my eyes open and keep my eyelids from shutting.
For 7 days and 7 nights, Gilgamesh slept. And on the 7th, I woke him. "Gilgamesh!
I have not slept.
Look!
I have not slept a moment.
Do you not see the loaves? Each day I make a loaf.
No.
See,
No.
the first is already full of worm,
No.
and the newest is yet on the hearth. They are the span of immortal life.
No.
You are not immortal.
Is there nothing at all I can do? Please, I beg of you.
And Utnapishtim's wife looked long and said, "As you are my seed and my son,
Yes?
I will tell you a secret.
Oh, please.
A secret my husband told me.
Yes?
In the middle of the ocean that lies between the worlds, there is a flower. That flower grew from the blood of the first mother, Tiamat, when she was carved from heaven by Marduk. It fell then on the ocean. That flower will not make you young, will not keep you immortal, but rather, when you grow old, it will make you young if you eat it.
Oh,
Although you lose your mind and your memory, you will be young again.
thank you.
Is that the kind of immortality you choose?
I will seek it.
Go then, down the other side of the island, and meet who you would meet.
And so I left her there, thanking her, and went down the other side of the isle, the mountain, and there,
Gilgamesh?
but you,
I am Utnapishtim.
but I've just left Utnapishtim on the mountain.
You have left the soul on the mountain.
Oh,
I am his body. I know what he knows.
will you take me across and stop halfway that I may dive?
And we will take rocks and tie them to your feet.
Oh, thank you.
And so we rowed across. And halfway, as the waves began to mount, I said, "Look into the brine. Do you not see it?"
Yes, I think I can.
And Gilgamesh jumped off and sank down to the bottom of the ocean.
Ah, the rocks on my feet. They pulled me down, and I held my breath. I held my breath for longer than any man living, any man perhaps who's ever done or will ever do. And down at the bottom of the ocean, I saw it there, and I seemed to scent it even through the waves, even through the water. and I reached out my hand to pluck it. And I reached out, and I reached out, and it was as they had said, as hard as they had said, for it had thorns so much more piercing than a rose, and the thorns pierced my flesh, and great plumes of red blood came out, and filled the water like huge flowers themselves, and it pierced with a bone, but I seized it anyway, and then I took a knife from my belt, and I cut the rope, and the stones fell from my feet, and up and up and up I swam. My lungs were bursting, but I managed to get to the boat, and he hauled me aboard.
Come, Gilgamesh! The storm is on us!
And I shall call this old men made young again.
Yes, but now you will help me man the boat, for great waves rose up, tidal waves, sweeping us on, sweeping us east, back to the shores of men. We came down to the lands of men, and I turned to King Gilgamesh and I said, can I come home with you?
But I thought...
I am mortal now, I cannot return this way.
Thank you. Of course you may come to Uruk and live with me.
And we journeyed then to the lands of men many months, coming at last to near the walls of Gilgamesh's city. I pointed, his clothes were as fine as ever, for they were immortal. But his skin was grey, his hair was matted.
I cannot return to my people like this. I will wash first in this well. If you will wait here, I shall just put the flower on the lip of the well, and then I shall be fit to see my people when I've bathed.
And as Gilgamesh bathed, a serpent came out from the hole it lived in, and suddenly lunged for the flower and devoured it in a great greedy gulp. And before Gilgamesh could reach it, it sloughed its skin and disappeared back into its hole and was gone.
Have I journeyed so long? Have I done all this for nothing? Is this the end of all my endeavours?
And Gilgamesh, empty-handed, came back from Uruk to Unuk. But he was changed. He became...
In after days, Gilgamesh the king became a just judge and a father to his people. He laid down great laws that provided the founding stone for the laws of Hammurabi. He it was who caused the whole tale to be recorded on a stone on his return. He it was who brought us this secret of the gods, a story from the time before the anger of the flood. And he it was who founded the great city of Uruk. And if you go there today, do you not see the great walls, how they shine like copper in the sun? Is it not burnt brick and good? Touch the threshold, it is ancient, for the 7 sages laid the foundation.
But Gilgamesh is gone. His fate was not the fate of the immortals. Gilgamesh has died, and his spirit has fled over the mountain of the gods, and the great gods of the underworld have been given their due. Nergal, his price, and the sister of Ishtar, her trophy. Gilgamesh is gone. He will not come again. But all that is left are the immortal clothes of kingship, the just laws he founded, the walls of Uruk that have withstood crusade and jihad, plague, invasion, and even bombing. And the epic itself, the founding stone of history. And that the Anunnaki themselves say will dwell and live as long as humanity lasts. However long that may be. We have been with you today.
This has been the incredible Dave Sawyer. Magnificent soundtrack.
Phonic FM.
That was Moonstripe on the fringes of the Street Art Festival a couple of years ago. And now a soundscape by Emma Welton called People to People, based on the rugby posts down by the river and canal area. I came across this through Make Tank, who had their 2nd anniversary evening, and I just followed up some links from that. There's other soundscapes in Paris Street, but I like this one because it's quite short, and I can play it complete. I'm not quite sure what to do with bits of sound, adding them into a drama, storytelling, musical kind of show. I'm sure they do fit in, but I'm not sure about editing it, what you can do with remix and so forth. I know it's okay with music, pop music to some extent, just taking samples out of things, and I think the J.G. Ballard stories lend themselves to clips. I still haven't fully understood what the News from the Sun is, so I don't mind repeating those. Having a wonderful time. That's that. I'm going to do that complete this time around, but I do clips out of that as well. And I think eventually these shows might have more bits of sound that have just been edited into different elements. But in the meantime, here's People to People complete.
Testing the rugby posts.
106.8 FM.
Sitting outside the bathroom window, kids and cats and dogs, and it's been a dance way. Now it's 20. It was DNA that done it. Smellation drops funny. Easy to see the fun in it, but I'm not laughing today. Not laughing.
That was bits of sound from videos from Exeter Street Arts Festival last couple of years, something like that. And the next item will be a story by Jill Amos, introduced by Katie Corkwell from an online session on Burns Night, which was supported by the Exeter City of Literature. And I think there'll be more storytelling in future shows, not just the storyteller, Matthew, and the Whitworth and Deal Theatre, where this show started out from. I'm going to try and find various elements to introduce into future ones. There is guidance here on how people can behave during a Zoom call or online events, so it works better as sound. So I think this is the sort of area to explore. Any other links, please get in touch. Will789GB on Twitter.
Phonic FM.
So I think it's 8 o'clock. Let us make a start. Others may well join as the evening goes on. So a very, very warm welcome to the Story Blaze for Burns Night. I'm Katie Corkwell. I've hosted a couple of these Story Blazes in the past, and they've been in 2019. We were actually able to meet in person at the wonderful malting space at the Bridge Inn in Topsham, where they have this enormous wood burning stove and everyone kind of gathers around. So, in a way, it's really sad that we can't be there tonight. But the great advantage of online storytelling is that people can come and join us from all kinds of different places who might never have made it to Topsham, which is just outside Exeter in Devon, for those of you who don't know it. So we've got 8 storytellers ready to tell their stories tonight. They're all except one. They live in Devon, and they've all at some point taken part in storytelling workshops that I run down here. I've been running them for several years. This last year, of course, has been a little different. We've had to either meet outdoors or meet online, but we've just about managed to keep the spark going. And I thought it was high time we created a performance space to celebrate what people have been doing. So we've got a whole range tonight. Some people have got years of experience under their belts, but this is maybe their first time that they're telling online. And then there are others who only started storytelling last September. So very bravely, they are up for joining us as well. And we've been very fortunate to be supported in this event by Exeter City of Literature. So a big thank you to the funding that's made this possible. So the structure of the evening, we're going to have 4 stories, then a very short little interval, and then another 4 stories. And as you may have picked up in, if I sent you a registration email, the kind of etiquette with online storytelling, it's great when somebody is telling a story, not when I'm chatting away, you can do what you like then, but when somebody is telling a story, if you could keep yourself on mute, not use the chat function because the little messages can be a bit distracting. And if you are going to move about a lot, then maybe think about turning your video off, so that's not too distracting either. That would be great. However, in between stories, when I'm chatting, when I'm introducing the next person, please feel free to use the chat. If you enjoyed the story, if there was a particular moment in the story that spoke to you, it's lovely for the storyteller to hear that, because when you're telling to a camera, there's really not so much feedback. I think we'll probably stay on mute until the end of each half, and then I'll give you an opportunity to clap everybody in that half. So just in between stories, you can wave your hands, do some silent clapping, use the reactions button, but we'll maybe keep ourselves on mute. And finally, we're recording it, as you can see, and that's just so we have the audio recording of the stories to use afterwards. We will not be using video at all, so don't feel you need to turn the video off for that purpose. Great. Well, without more ado, I'm going to introduce our first storyteller. Jill Amos started storytelling last September. She's very new to it, but she's very bravely agreed to take part this evening, and she's chosen a story from a Scottish storyteller as a kind of nod to Burns Night. So although this has echoes of traditional stories, I believe the story was actually created by Scottish storyteller Fiona Herbert, who is, I believe, very happy for her work to be shared. So over to you, Jill.
Thank you. I'm just going to switch my camera to gallery so I don't get a big picture of myself. That's better. So, there was once an unhappy wife. Now, she hadn't always been unhappy. In fact, when she first met her husband, they had some lovely times. She was paid compliments, and they would go out and have great fun together. But after a while, the compliments dwindled away. And when she told a joke, he no longer laughed. She was met with a stony silence and rolled eyes. And they just weren't so happy. But the worst thing was the unkind comments. And it got so bad that she really thought, I don't really feel like going out very much anymore. But this one day, it was a nice sunny afternoon, and she thought, I'm going to take myself to the park and just have a think about things. So off she went on the bus to the park, where she found a lovely shady tree to sit underneath. And she settled down. She'd brought a book with her, not so much to read, but just so that other people wouldn't disturb her and interfere with and come and talk to her and things. And it wasn't long before she'd actually started to nod off, and she went into a doze. Now, she must have dozed for quite some time, but when she woke up, she looked down at her book, and there on the page, she saw a slug, and it was waving its eye stalks at her, quite wildly, in fact. She couldn't help but smile. And as she looked down on the page, she fancied that she saw some silvery, slithery writing across the page. And she thought, that's very odd. Either I'm going mad, or this snail is starting to communicate with me. I must be having a nervous breakdown. So she looked down, and there, sure enough, across the page, there was the writing. And it said, I can help you. Thought the woman. I really must be cracking up properly, because I've never met a snail or heard of a snail that can write and communicate. But as she was thinking and worrying about her mental health, the snail set off on the next page, and it was swerving and weaving across the page, leaving its slimy trail in its wake. And before she knew it, on the other page, there was another message. She looked carefully, and it read, "You are not going mad." Thought the woman, I really am going mad. This is crazy stuff. But her curiosity got the better of her, and she thought, well, I'm going to turn over. And she carefully picked the slug up and put it on the next page, and thought, maybe there's some more message from me that you've got, slug. And sure enough, off it set again. With great determination, it slithered and slided across the page. Before long, there was another message, and it read, 3 wishes, he gets double. Well, either I'm mad, or I find myself with a magical slug. And there's nobody here, so nobody will notice if I just make a wish. Nobody will know that I think I'm myself a bit mad. So she gently picked the slug up, and she thought to herself, what would I really like? And she thought about how she never got any nice comments anymore from her husband. And she knew what she wanted. She looked at the slug and she said, I wish for great beauty. And she waited and she thought, well, I don't actually feel any different. Oh, well, I don't think there's anything in this magical slug. But nonetheless, she carefully wrapped him up and put him in her bag. And she went off to catch a bus home. Now, on the bus, it was quite crowded, but not long, there was a young man got up and offered her his seat. And she thought, this doesn't normally happen to me. Oh my goodness, I know I've put on a few pounds recently, but maybe he thinks I'm pregnant. And then she thought, I know my husband says I'm not aging very well. Maybe he actually thinks I'm a pensioner. And she spent the rest of the journey looking down at her feet. So she didn't see that the other passengers were looking at her admiringly. It came to her stop and she got off. And she went back to her flat. And as soon as she opened her door, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. My goodness, she was still herself, but somehow just a better version of herself. She had bright, shiny eyes and shiny hair and glowing skin. She just seemed so radiant. She even seemed a bit taller and like she'd lost a few pounds. She was delighted. Oh my goodness, she stood transfixed in front of the mirror for quite some time, until she heard the key go in the lock behind her. And the door swung open, and her husband walked through the door. He gasped, but she gasped as well, because there in the doorway was her husband, yes. But if you can imagine the most handsome man, imagine the most handsome parts of every man you've ever dreamed of, met, heard about, and all the best bits combined into one, that was her husband. My goodness, he was drop dead gorgeous. And no sooner had he clocked himself in the mirror than he turned around and went off in the direction of town. Oh, thought the woman, that didn't really have the desired effect. But I still have 2 wishes from my magical slug. So she carefully got her slug out of her bag. And she thought, what shall I wish for this time? And the thing that popped into her head was how her husband no longer laughed at her jokes or stories and the stony stares and the rolled eyes. And she thought, I know, I wish for great wit. She got the slug back in her bag. Now, just then, the phone rang. And she picked it up, And it was one of those annoying PPI calls that I'm sure we've all had. And normally she would just politely say goodbye and put the phone down. But this time she thought, oh no, I'll have a chat with this chap. And it wasn't long before he actually had to hang the phone up because he was laughing so much. So she thought, all right, I'm in for a good night. So I'm going to go out and enjoy myself. I've got lovely looks. I feel sparkling, full of wit. And off she headed up to town. Now she came to a bar that her and her husband used to go to, but he'd recently said she wasn't hip or trendy enough to go there anymore. And I'm sure if we all cast our minds back in the mist of time, we can remember going to lovely pubs like this with real ale and cocktails, nice food and groovy music. And she went in and she struck up a conversation with the bartender, who was immediately absolutely delighted with her company and said, you can have free drinks for the rest of the evening. Great, she thought. I'm in for a good night. But then she could hear from the back of the bar the most raucous laughter. And there she turned round and she could see her husband, surrounded by a group of adoring faces, looking at him, practically salivating in front of him because he was so gorgeous. And not only that, but behind him was the group of their partners who didn't even mind that he was flirting outrageously with their beloveds because they were doubled up with laughter. And I have to say, some of them had their legs crossed because they were laughing so much. Right, thought the woman, I'm out of here. I'm not going to stick around while everybody fawns over my husband. So she went back home and she thought, I still have one wish. What shall it be? And she thought long and hard. And then an idea came to her, thought came to her. She got the slug carefully out of her bag again. And she looked at the slug and she said, 3 wishes, but he gets double, right? And the slug seemed to nod with its eye stalks. So she said very, very clearly to the slug, a mild heart attack. And that was that.
106.8 FM.